The allegations in the Globe story this morning are false.
Did anyone in the Prime Minister's office at any time communicate with anyone in the former Attorney General's office?
As the Prime Minister has said earlier today, these allegations are false.
This is a yes or no answer.
As the Prime Minister outlined today, he has not given directives to either my predecessor or myself.
When the now former Justice Minister refused to drop the fraud and corruption trial against SNC-Lavalin, she was fired.
I don't have any comment.
Just some of the heated exchanges and responses and reactions from today on Parliament Hill and with the Prime Minister. This after the Globe and Mail reported that the Prime Minister's office allegedly pressed the former Justice Minister and Attorney General to strike a deal with SNC-Lavalin and avoid prosecuting the engineering firm. The Prime Minister says the allegations are false, but there's still lots of questions. Let's bring in at issue for some analysis. Chantal Hébert is in Montreal, Andrew Coyne is in Toronto, and Althea Raj is here in Ottawa tonight. I'll start with you, Chantal. What do you make of the government's response to these allegations? Definitively saying the allegations are false, but the language after that a little more precise.
It doesn't really matter how precise or imprecise the language was, in as much as the government could have ended much of this controversy today had one of its own ministers stood up to say, no, I wasn't pressured, and there's nothing to this story, and that would be Jody Wilson-Raybould. That is not what happened. And so you are treated to the side of the Prime Minister and the minister at the center of the story, clearly not on the same page.
And what should we make of that, Andrew? The fact that Jody Wilson-Raybould did not say anything more than no comment. I mean, I don't want to ascribe too much motivation, but obviously that's not good to just leave that hanging out there like that either.
Well, and having issued that strange letter after she was demoted in the cabinet shuffle, in which she said, amongst other things, that she'd stood against, you know, the political interference in the office of the Attorney General. That seems like a thing you wouldn't necessarily need to say if there was nothing like that happening. So it's going to be quite a cabinet meeting, the next cabinet meeting. I don't know how much more serious it can get. You know, if you've got what's alleged here is that a large, well-connected corporation facing serious charges of fraud and corruption could basically have those charges put aside or transferred into this deferred prosecution method by a call to the Prime Minister's office. What kind of country is that allows that?
Althea, what did you make of the response from the government today?
Well, they didn't say that there had been no communications or no conversations. They just said that she had not been pressured and had not been directed. And so I think that that's very important to stress. I completely 100% agree with Chantal about the fact that Jody Wilson-Raybould could have put this issue to rest had she chosen to do so. But actually a lot of people, I would say in the Prime Minister's office and especially in caucus, believe that Jody Wilson-Raybould is the source of that story, and that does make, to Andrew's point, raise some important questions about what happens in cabinet going forward. How can you have a cabinet discussion that is frank, open, if you think that one member of that team might leak things that they are uncomfortable with to members of the media? So there's like two parts to this story. You know, one is the personal dynamics that are happening within the Trudeau cabinet, and then there's the whole issue about, is there, fire where there is smoke? Because it does look like there may have been some impropriety, but when you look actually at what Jody Wilson-Raybould's role is, she is in the law allowed to intervene as long as that is transparent and public.
Let's be clear, it's not only Jody Wilson-Raybould's non-denials, it's the Prime Minister's non-denial of a denial. The charge that he denied was a charge that wasn't made, which is that there was an explicit direction as opposed to influence or pressure. So it was a very lawyerly, as others have said, a very lawyerly statement. When he was asked explicitly by the reporters there, he retreated back into the same statement. I think if he wanted to serve his cause, he might better have not had that press conference at all than do what he did.
Rosie, if you don't mind, I'd just like to rewind the tape a bit. Because, yes, all that happened today kind of showed that there are holes in the government story, and there are gaping holes in it. But if you rewind and you look at the entire picture, what you see is the insertion of this legal mechanism to replace prosecution. It goes back to 2017. So this looks like something, if there is something, that started way before there was a clash in a conversation, or call it what you want, with Jody Wilson-Raybould. That's one. Two, yes, Lavalin is well connected, but any government under any prime minister would pause at the notion that one of the world's leading engineering firms, and our leading engineering firms with thousands of people working for it in Canada, could go under. So set that and the motivations that the government could have had if it went down that road. And finally, I have to say that if you are a person of such principle that you feel that someone is trying to interfere with the justice system, in the old days that person would have stood up and resigned, not leaked to a newspaper or walked around saying no comment.
So, I mean, obviously, we don't know the source, but I take your point, Althea, that people are suggesting this. Is there a reason why Jody Wilson-Raybould would not talk here? Like a logical reason? Certainly, we know she was angry. We know she was upset about the cabinet shuffle. I don't think that's something we can dispute. But Andrew, is there another reason why she might not be comfortable saying more?
Well,
is that plausible? I don't know.
If the story is true.
We're speculating, of course, but if the story is true, if she's still in cabinet, I mean, we don't know. I mean, whenever these stories come out, it's always as interesting, not just the substance of the story, but who and why the story was made public.
Sure.
One has to assume this was somebody familiar with the story, therefore somewhere close to the former justice minister, but we just don't really know for sure.
Yeah, I guess I was suggesting that maybe in her role as Attorney General, she thought she was the government's lawyer and protecting a like, I don't know whether any of that is something that would have run through her head.
Well, that's what she said publicly was, I cannot comment because I was the government's lawyer, but that may not be.
You don't look like you buy that. Go ahead, Chantal.
No, but when you're faced with a story that you know is false, you don't say no comment. You say, this is hogwash. It's not true. I don't know who's been spinning that tale, but that is not my recollection. If you see something that is false, that's what any normal person would do, including someone who is Attorney General. We're not going into a case that is in front of the courts here. This is not judicial discretion.
Yes.
It's saying this is true or this is not true. If you're not going to say it's false, then you should speak up and explain why you're saying no comment.
I think Althea is right that the story has those two legs. There's the actual allegations, which are serious and we need to know more about, and then there's what this does to cabinet and government. So let's sort of pull back and talk about what the damage is to the government here.
Well, I mean, it harkens back to the sponsorship scandal, right? We don't yet know if the story is true. What was the benefit in the government acting in this way, right? And that's a big piece of that puzzle if the story is indeed true. But usually when there is a type of story like this, it kind of comes out in little driblets. What is clear is that SNC-Lavalin lobbied hard the Liberal government at all levels, whether it was cabinet ministers directly, the staff in their offices, the Prime Minister's office. And in fact, after it was made public that the public prosecutor was not going to offer them this sort of version of a plea bargain, they actually met with Ambassador McNaughton. They met again with the Prime Minister's office, and then they came out and said they were going to appeal the decision. So from the record that is public, and if there is a meeting that the PMO asks for example, SNC-Lavalin doesn't need to register that. So the snapshot that we have makes it very clear that they were extremely dedicated to this issue and putting immense pressure on the government.
It would be wrong of the Attorney General herself to interfere with the Director of Public Prosecutions without posting it publicly. There are provisions in which she can issue instructions, but it has to be public. So you have that combination of accountability and yet independence from political interference. It is especially wrong, or would be especially wrong, if there were political staff in the Prime Minister's office pressuring her to do so on behalf of, let's not forget, a company that just recently essentially evaded charges. They did a compliance agreement on charges of funneling over $100,000 in illegal campaign contributions to the Liberal Party of Canada. So if there was anybody they were ever going to intervene with or make any suggestions, any representations of any kind, the last one should be SNC-Lavalin. So that just makes it absolutely radioactive in this case. And whether SNC-Lavalin would like to pursue a strategy of saying, oh, there'll be all these jobs lost if we actually have to face criminal prosecution, I'm not sure that really should sit well with people of sort of basically taking those workers hostage to avoid accountability and responsibility for what they are accused of having done.
Okay,
Well,
last word to
yes,
Chantal. Last word to
this is
Chantal. Last word
unbelievably
to
tough.
Chantal.
Mind you, the notion that you are banned for a decade from pursuing federal contracts
Yes.
and what that does to you internationally is not just a slap on the wrist, and it does impact on those workers.
Sure.
I hate to use those words, but I'm convinced that part of the argument, if someone went down the road of arguing for giving SNC-Lavalin a pass from criminal prosecution in exchange for giving money back, etc., would be too big to fail. An argument that we heard at the time of the global financial crisis. This is not a small company whose demise would not be felt not only on the jobs front, but on the innovation front. So I'm guessing that was what they lobbied on. It couldn't have been on their contributions to the Liberal coffers anymore, because those have
In
become illegal.
2011.
Yes. Okay, got to leave it there. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. Before we go, though, be sure to subscribe.